What is going on, Colts Nation, and welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, back for another episode, guys. And guys, with the draft a little under, actually, a month away by the time this podcast will be dropping, we wanted to talk about some positions of need for the Indianapolis Colts. We want to rank them. We have 4 positions of need today that we are going to talk about. Honestly, Derek, it's crazy because like we were trying to think of a 5th one, and we're like, there's not really a 5th one. It's just like really like the Colts in a couple of these positions, and we'll talk about it. They probably need to double dip in the way that they address certain positions. It's going to be interesting to see kind of the route the Colts go. Obviously, they still have the option of free agency, and there's a few guys out there that can help remedy some of these positions of need for the Colts. But right now, as it stands, these are our top 4 needs for the Indianapolis Colts pre-draft at the end of April. So without further ado, let's start with the number 4 need, in our opinion, for the Indianapolis Colts as it currently stands with their roster right now. What might that be, Derek? What is the number 4 need for the Colts, and why is it number 4?
Well, it's going to end up being wide receiver. We said it in a bunch of other videos recently. The reason it's number 4 is because at least you know from a standpoint that you have a lot of guys that are covering those spots and have, your starters are in a good place. Michael Pittman, I think, is going to have a rebound year with whatever quarterback that we get of the future. Shane Steichen, I think, is going to devise a better game plan than what we saw this last year and is going to find ways to get Michael Pittman open and utilize his strengths. I think Alec Pierce is going to take that leap, that sophomore leap that everyone wants to think about. You added Isaiah McKenzie, who can be a really decent slot option for you, and you still have Ashton Doolin remaining on the roster. So in totality, your top 4 that you have is solid. It's solid. It's not great. It's not bad. It's solid. So at least you know that moving forward, there's a lot of other positions that the Colts really need to fix. And we'll talk about those here shortly. But wide receiver definitely needs to try to find another playmaker for that sort of situation. But at least in this moment, a reason why it's number 4 compared to a lot of the others is because at least you know you have a couple of solid options on the roster already. You just want to try to find the next great best thing to add to that group.
Yeah, and he only signed Isaiah McKenzie to a 1-year deal. So, like, who knows if he'll be back in Indy next year. You need, I think, kind of that that burner type of guy, right? You need that guy that's going to take the top off of the defenses. That guy like what T.Y. Hilton was for so many years with the Colts. That guy that just makes defenses worry at night. Like, how the heck are we going to guard this guy? The Colts need one of those guys. I know Zay Flowers is a name that a lot of people love. I don't know if he'll be there in the second round. Probably not at this rate. But a guy like that, right? A guy that has that speed, that elite speed that can just like change the pace of this game and change the pace for the quarterback and just give them a different type of receiver, right? We talked about in a previous video how Isaiah McKenzie was so much different in his skill set. I think you need a kind of a receiver like that, right? A guy that's not just a temporary solution, a guy that is a long-term solution. And so whether that means addressing it this year in the draft, which I think you probably should, I think you could get a guy in maybe the 3rd or 4th round. I would be pretty happy with that because you already addressed it once, but I think it needs to be addressed one more time. And I think if you're able to do that and get a guy like that, I think your wide receiver room would look pretty good, all things considered. So I think that's definitely on the table, and the Colts should definitely consider that and really get that rookie quarterback or whoever you get the most weapons that you can give them, right? And give them guys that they can work with, grow with, build that, camaraderie and trust with. And, that's kind of that's what they did when they drafted Luck, right? They did the same thing with Luck and Hilton in the same draft. And so I would love to see the Colts do something similar in terms of getting a mid-round receiver and letting those two work together. But it's not the same scenario because, T.Y. Hilton was the number 2 pretty much at the start of the year. And that's not necessarily going to be the case here. But I do think if you get a speedy wide receiver, that would go a long way for your receivers moving forward. Because, Pearson Pittman, they're both those bigger body kind of possession wide receivers, right? You don't really have that burner of a guy that's going to be here long term, right? So I think that would definitely be one that the Colts would be really wise to invest in here in this draft at some point. All right. Number 3 is interior offensive lineman. As it currently stands, Will Fries is still the starter at right guard. He started after obviously Danny Pinter got benched. And then Danny Pinter is really your only other guard option right now as a backup solution. And so I think it'd be wise for the Colts to go look and address this offensive line interior with a player, I think, in free agency. And maybe they even consider drafting a guy in the mid rounds as well. I just think you need somebody that's going to compete with Will Fries at right guard. You need somebody who's going to push him. Whether or not they beat Will Fries out is to be determined, but I still think, in some way, shape, or form, you need to get some depth on that offensive line. Whether that guy's a starter, whether or not, you just need some quality depth on that offensive line. And so talk to me about the guard position here, the interior offensive line position, and what you're looking for the Colts here.
Yeah, and this kind of argument can also be pretty much added to the tackle depth as well. I mean, right now, I don't think outside of Carter O'Donnell, I don't really think the Indianapolis Colts have depth on their tackle position. So that's another thing that they're going to have to address in free agency or in the draft one way or another. But I know that I have said through multiple different times that there are a couple of really solid guys in free agency still that I would want the Indianapolis Colts to try to take over. Will Fries is a serviceable guard, but I don't know if Will Fries should be the long-term solution for this team going forward. So I would like it if the Indianapolis Colts went and got somebody who could be the full-time starter for multiple years going forward, because as you said, Danny Pinter is your only guy in the middle right now that is your backup for anyone, left guard, center, and right guard. We don't have depth. And Carter O'Donnell, you just signed a week ago, that's not going to be a long-term solution at tackle depth. So the whole O-line in particular, but mainly the interior, because we saw that our two guys at tackle can definitely be enough to be able to handle their own for right now. But at right guard specifically, you're having the issue of you don't know if that spot is up to par with the best of them. So you want to try to find someone who can do that. And then you need to find depth, because depth at all of those positions, because we kept talking about it in the other video. The Indianapolis Colts, they neglected it in 2021's or 2022's offseason. And so far, they've neglected it through 2023's offseason as well as of this moment. But we'll have to see how they go from there. But the offensive line as it stands is in a good spot from a starter standpoint. But depth-wise, this needs a lot of action. And that's why it's number 3 on this list.
Absolutely. I mean, gosh, the Colts have gotten lucky before where, they didn't really have a lot of injuries, but the last couple of years they've had some injuries, and unfortunately they've had to, have some solutions where there's been some really low quality backup options that they've had to roll with, and it's really hurt them, in that time. And so I think the Colts would be wise to go get a few options here, one at tackle, one at guard. And then I think you'd be at a much better place on your offensive line as a whole. And you have your starters, but you need some guys that can fill in and do a quality job as the backup, be serviceable as the backup. And I think if you can do that, you'd be pretty set the offensive line. And it's really not going to cost you that much either, right? To go and get a Dalton Risner or somebody like that in the interior to push Will Fries. At the best case scenario, Will Fries wins out the job, and boom, he's your starter long term. But, you also just can't hand him the job. You just can't do that, right? You have to push him. You have to be able to do that, right? All your other positions are pretty much set this year, except for right guard. So I do think you need to just have that competition because you don't know if he's your long-term solution, right? Ryman's your long-term solution at left tackle, at least you believe right now, right? Quentin Nelson at left guard, Ryan Kelly for right now, Braden Smith obviously at right tackle. Right guard is the one where you're not sure yet. So you just need to, I think, just add some more competition in there, right? And we saw how important that was a couple of years ago, Derek, in that Arizona game, which you mentioned it in a previous podcast. Like when you were down to like your 6th and 7th and 8th linemen, and they came in and they filled in well, and you won that game because of that depth that you had. So you just can't afford to neglect it again like Ballard did last offseason. It came back to bite the Colts in the butt amongst all their many issues they had last year. Backup offensive linemen were certainly an issue for the Colts last year. So I definitely think that is a huge need for Indianapolis, is not just on the interior, but also getting maybe a quality tackle, swing tackle option there as well. Would definitely be good for them and their offensive line. All right. Number 2 here, we got to go with corner, right? The Colts right now, I mean, gosh, you look at it, Derek, Kenny Moore, Isaiah Rodgers, Dallas Flowers, I guess. You need major, major help at corner. Like you need to. I think this is the one position out of all of them, Derek, where I would not be mad if the Colts added 2 or 3 guys, to be completely honest with you. Like I think it's that like pressing for you to get a corner. Now, it's been rumored that the Colts have been in the market to get a corner. I know a lot of people have linked like Shaquille Griffin to the Colts. I know Rocky Sin, former Colt, is still out there as well. So like there's options out there at corner. I think it's like it's a need for the Colts, and there's a couple quality options out there for the Colts. And I also think even if they sign a guy in free agency, you got to draft a guy probably in that second round. What are your thoughts on corner and just how dire of a need it is for the Colts?
Well, it's the first position on this list that has a position of need that needs to be filled. Like when you traded away Stephon Gilmore and you didn't re-sign Brandon Faison, which everyone knew was probably going to end up happening, you've now left a spot open. And not only left a spot open, but Stephon Gilmore last season was a top 10 corner in the league. So that it makes it even harder to replace with that because Stephon Gilmore was on a whole nother level. So you now have Isaiah Rodgers as your corner number 1. Kenny Moore is your corner number 2, but he's mainly on the inside. Now you have to find that true bona fide number 2 corner out there on the edge. And who is that going to be? I have no idea. But you can't sit here and tell me that Dallas Flowers or Tony Brown is going to be that guy. So you have to do that. And there's going to have to be quite a few guys. There's going to have to be at least 2 corner signings, Cody, from the Indianapolis Colts from now until the season starts. That is going to have to be able to make sure that we have the depth needed for this position because Isaiah Rodgers has to come off the field. Kenny Moore has to come off the field. So, you have to find guys that can do that. So, it's like you said, it needs to be a position that's double dipped, whether it be 2 corners in the draft, 2 corners in free agency. I don't know. Like the Indianapolis Colts did a really good job this offseason of getting defensive line help, even if because you weren't bringing back Yannick Ngakoue, not for the price that he's at. And, from you brought in a defensive tackle on Tavon Bryan, who's going to, be a solid 3 tech for you guys. And then, bringing in Abukum, who's going to end up being that replacement on the edge. And then you brought Tyquan Lewis back as well. So you feel confident that through free agency, defensive line wise, they did a fantastic job. And they went and got EJ Speed back in the linebacker group. So, the defense for the majority of it, they've been maintaining it in free agency. Do they go with another move in the free agency market from the defensive standpoint? Because normally Indianapolis does a lot of its defensive work through free agency. And we got to remember, it took a couple weeks before Stephon Gilmore even signed with Indianapolis going into it. I don't remember when exactly he did sign, but I can remember it was probably in April by the time that it happened. So it took a while to get Stephon Gilmore into the building from last year. So it would not surprise me if Indy does make a splash at cornerback in free agency still, because it needs to happen. Something needs to happen with the corner. And I would rather have a vet, at least if the vet's not starting, at least have the vet in the locker room and in that room working with these guys rather than just having all young guys in there and just relying on Kenny Moore to be the leading source of that. So I would go with that.
Yep, absolutely. It's like of all these positions, like we said, it is the one that needs to be not just addressed once, but probably twice, if not more than that, for sure. All right, the last position that we have, the number one position, to surprise of nobody, is the quarterback position. The Colts got to figure it out, right? They have their backup, Gardner Minshew, but they don't have their starter yet, right? And a lot of people have said the Colts are going to go via draft. Been rumors about trading for Lamar Jackson. Regardless of how the Colts go about it, it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be it needs to be focused as what it is, the most important position in all of the NFL. In all of football, the quarterback is the most important position. And the Colts got to figure it out, whether it's drafting their guy at 4, whether it's trading for somebody, whether it's trading up, trading back, whatever it is. So wherever you are, wherever you stand on where the Colts and how the Colts should acquire that quarterback, the fact is they got to do it somehow. They have to figure out the best way to get the best player for them for the now and for the future.
Yep. I mean, it's the one thing we've been talking about since week 2 of the 2022 season, that the Indianapolis Colts have a real problem on their hands with their quarterback, right? So we know that it is time the Indianapolis Colts got serious and found a quarterback that they can have for multiple years. I don't know if you saw it on Twitter yesterday, Cody, but I think the Colts are now in the record books that tied for the second longest streak in NFL history on consecutive seasons with a different starting quarterback at the helm. So from 2015 on, every single year, we have had a different quarterback starting every single year. It was Andrew Luck, Jacoby Brissett, Andrew Luck, Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, and now we're about to have another one. So, this will be the 8th season in a row that the Indianapolis Colts have had a different guy starting every year. And this has got to be now the time where the Indianapolis Colts figure it out. And I think that they will one way or another. It's got to happen. So that's going to be interesting to see what they do with that. But that's definitely the number one need.
Yep, and they can't afford to get cute, right? They can't, like, this is one of those positions where, if you feel like strongly about a guy, you go and do it. Do whatever it takes to get him in the building, because I promise you won't regret it if it works out and you're sold on him, right? Yep. That's just how it is. Like, it's that important where it doesn't matter. You could trade away your best player if you get your franchise quarterback, it's worth it. Like, it just is. You see that. Like, heck, the Chiefs, look what they did. They traded away one of their best players, Tyreek Hill, and they still won the Super Bowl because of their quarterback, right? And so it's the same way where, like, the quarterback, it's the end-all, be-all in the NFL, and it always will be. You have to have a good one. You have to have a top quarterback. If you don't, you're going to unfortunately be where the Colts have been, irrelevant, out of everything, right? They've been on the outside looking in for years now. Why? They haven't figured it out. And so this is the year they got to do it, man. They got to do it.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Well, that's going to do it for this one, guys. That's all the positions that we think are needed pre-draft. Let us know your thoughts, guys, on like where you would potentially rank these, and if there's one position that you guys think that could be addressed that we're kind of not taking into account as much. But that's going to do it for this one. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.